Hello, hello. We are back here for another You Owe Me series. I've got John, VP of Sales at Custom Cones. John, how the hell are you, man?
I'm doing well. Yeah, just been super busy. We're right now entering like our peak season. Been going to a lot of trade shows, so just keeping busy over here in Washington.
Awesome. Cool. So I know this is kind of trade show season happening about now. There's a lot back to back to back. You're on the sales front with Custom Cones, obviously a packaging player servicing brands across the country. Before we get into all that, how did you get involved in cannabis and into the sales seat over there with Custom Cones? Give us a quick background if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been interested in cannabis, even when I was in college. Like I had like started like a cannabis symposium over there in Babson with like MBA students. A lot of the students actually that I graduated with eventually started cannabis oriented like businesses, which one of them was Frederick, which is one of the founders of the company. We went to college together. So when, it was starting up, he just hit me up, said that, he would love for me to join since I was already in the cannabis industry working with a previous company. Then I just came through and then saw there was a big need for sales. Obviously, I'm more of like wanting to help people. So a lot of our business philosophy is like being like a consultant to our partner clients. So it was just like a perfect fit, and that's how it kind of expanded into the sales team.
So how long have you been there?
Just over 5 years now. So a decent amount of time seeing it go from just us three, Harrison, me, Frederick, all the way now to over 35 people. Have gone from like multiple warehouses. It was a really small warehouse, like 1,000 feet when we first started. Now we're at like 26,000 feet. So seen a lot of growth in the industry and then also in our company as well.
Got it. So you're essentially managing sales team directly yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, helping the sales team, helping the customer service team. We do have a customer service manager, but kind of help her with any like escalated things. I also do some of the sales, like I close a lot of like the top clients, some of the people that we really are like targeting to partner up with. Also help with like distribution, so kind of like managing, getting new distributors, getting them onboarded, setting them up on the website, showing them all the items that we have available.
Cool. So how many direct sales reps are you working with today now? Like how many are you overseeing?
Yeah, right now we have 8 direct reps that I'm overseeing. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's a really interesting topic of conversation for us here at CCA. Cannabis collects also on the collection side, since we have a lot of members that tell us, yeah, our sales team is responsible for credit extension. They're also responsible for collecting on outstanding AR. And I used to be in the packaging business myself, so I kind of understand how that world plays, especially if you're doing custom manufacturing, how expensive it can be for shipping, how, you can't really return a lot of these items, especially if someone's logo is branded there. Walk me through how it works at Custom Cone with regards to extending terms to customers and your collection department.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it's kind of what you mentioned. It was like the salesperson would kind of be able to handle that and be doing that, but we realized that really wasn't effective. We want to obviously have our sales team helping with orders and kind of helping the client, not really, getting bogged down by those things. So we kind of set up a process where essentially we have a credit app form where the client can then fill that out. We then get the AR team to then get CC'd into the email. The client fills that all out. Then the accounting team reviews all the references, calls the references if needed. We then utilize software like yours where we then look up if they have any flags on the account, if there's anything that we need to know immediately. We also have kind of like standards in that we push the client to have at least 3 orders with us above 3,000 in value. So we kind of have that, like, the rapport with the client where we're seeing that they definitely are buying these orders, they're paying in full previously, and then we could then, touch upon it. We can then extend that. In terms of getting like the final decision, the accounting team gets me all that information. I then work with all the partners to just verify that we can extend that, since obviously, as you mentioned, net terms is kind of a tricky situation, especially in our industry. But then we tend to start them off small. We give like a credit limit of about like 5,000, give like a net terms of 15, and then let them know, hey, if you are paying on time, if we're not having any issues, then we could then extend that even further, especially if you're a valued client over like many years for us. And then in terms of like collections, the AR department essentially runs a report where we look at all outstanding invoices. They then write to the sales team to just verify that these are accurate, that there's not any that need to be voided. Or, sometimes as we do customs, it'll take a longer time to get these items completed. Sometimes maybe it could be delayed. So we verify first that we indeed do need to collect on these invoices. And then the accounting team then, since they're already were CC'd in the email, they then start to follow up on these email chains, trying to just, verify that, there is a movement on payment being issued for those invoices.
Amazing. You just nailed so many key elements of a tight credit collection process. Like going over a couple of things that you mentioned from a credit app, basically the division of duties between sales and accounting, making sure that there's at least 3 orders before you're extending terms, starting small, then growing. And then again, kind of having the reporting on the collection side done with sales to verify to make sure that you're not going to piss off any active customers if they're not late. Having that kind of division that you guys have seemed to figure out is pretty uncommon from what I've seen in the industry at large, right? And it's something that's super important to make sure you really have those things established, especially around splitting up sales and collections. So when I used to run a company in Colorado, we had our sales reps paid on collection. We had them going out and trying to collect their own AR. And I also realized what a terrible idea. What did anything happen there, specifically, or any stories or any triggers where you were like, damn, we got to fix this. We got to bring in an accounting team to handle the collections and AR side versus myself or sales reps going out and doing this dirty work ourselves?
Yeah, I would say the more pressing thing, or the thing that we learned the most, was that, the cannabis industry, a lot of these clients are like last minute. So when they're asking you for terms, they want a response pretty quickly, whether it's going to happen or not, because then they need to alert their accounting team if they're going to get, if they have the funds paid in full, or if they want to utilize the net terms so that we immediately get this order out so that we're not waiting for payment to come in. Wires or ACH take a couple of days to process or whatever the case. So we just started to see a big influx of clients getting really, kind of frustrated in that they wanted a response within a day. Obviously I push the sales team to always respond to all clients within 24 hours, but then it starts to get tougher when, you're having to invoice them, make new orders, and then on top of that, review a credit form and then respond to them in terms of what needs to get done. That starts to like bog the salesperson down. So then we started to get more people that were like, I need a response ASAP. And that's kind of where I first realized that, hey, we've scaled enough that we definitely need an accounting department. And then I would say for just collections, it definitely was a big issue where, these reports are huge. Then the salesperson, they're like, I'm going to get to it, but it took them 2 weeks to go through the whole list when we could have probably collected that money much sooner, especially when, like, some things are pressing where, let's say, like a Canadian client goes bankrupt. Once a certain date that they go bankrupt, you can't collect that anymore. And we did have that issue before where, somebody did go bankrupt and then we started reaching out to them after the date of when it became bankrupt instead of getting payment first. So that's kind of where we're prioritizing speed to get to these clients faster, because obviously things can change so much in the industry. One company can be really strong, but then have a big issue that then makes them insolvent. So we just realized that it's much better to get in front of it.
Perfect. And I mean, I've seen this happen before, and I know it might put you in a tough spot, but what happens if you have a large client, maybe it's a new client that is asking for a lot of money on terms, and they're asking for extended terms, and they're a big MSO or it's a big deal, and that it could really move the needle forward, but you've got accounting maybe on the back end saying, this is risky, John. We really probably shouldn't do this. How do you walk that line? Because we see so often, sales has one priority, accounting and compliance has another to mitigate that risk. And then you're kind of in that driver's seat managing client communication. How do you make those judgment calls of risk reward if maybe you might be overextending yourself to try to work with a big deal, but it's a big deal?
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, I tend to go on the side of caution. just because, obviously it's great to get the sale, but if it's too risky, it just will put us in a predicament where we might even then not have a relationship with this client, because if they're behind on payment, then we're kind of, not happy with that. But if we decide that the client is a really big fit for us, meaning that we have, really spoken with all the team, we've spoken with the CEO, we're all on this, aligned on the same page, then we tend to try to like work with them. One ways that we try to work with them is that maybe if we don't give them the full net term amount, I lower the deposit amount that they need to do for custom, since generally it's 50% down to start the order and then 50% to finish the order. If we can't meet on that full net terms amount, then I start to use those type of tactics where we're like, okay, I'll take a 20% deposit, so that we don't need to take that full 50% down. Try to work in that way. Or at the minimum, also would start to then try to, see if there's anything else they need, like machinery. Machinery, we tend to not give any net terms, but then those are orders that we can then get paid in full, and we kind of have that rapport with the client, so that gives us more likelihood to then give them net terms on the items. So we try to work with them as much as possible. I know a lot of the times it's not possible, especially if they're asking for, super high limits, like let's say like a net 30, or another net 60, which, kind of seems like is happening more often, but we try to work with them as much as possible.
So you are seeing more and more operators asking your sales team and maybe going through the accounting process for larger and longer limits. Is that what you're seeing more frequently now?
For sure, especially from the MSOs and the licensed producers in Canada, for sure they want to see that, and I understand too, because with talking with them a lot of the times, the reason for that is that they're not getting paid until those timelines, right? They're selling to the dispensary. Those dispensaries are on them with 45-day terms. Sometimes they're late. Sometimes they even have negotiated 60-day terms, so they're more on the position of, well, we need to get paid for before we can pay you, or they want to get in that cadence. So yeah, I'm seeing that more. I'm not seeing that more in like the smaller companies. Smaller companies are still okay with like 15, 30-day terms, but definitely the bigger players are wanting those type of terms.
And I think one facet of your business, the packaging business, that's different than a lot of the operators and brands selling directly to the dispensaries is, like you mentioned, you guys do custom product, and you kind of have the ability to ask for 50% up front. That's really standard, right? 50% up front, 50% upon delivery, and then maybe you're allowing that net 15, net 30 on delivery, but you're still getting 50% up front, which should more or less take care of your cost. That is not happening in the plant touching side of the world from what we see. It's, net 30 or nothing. They're basically, the dispensaries are holding a lot of the power now, asking for net 30 without giving any sort of deposits. And it's causing a lot of friction, which then inevitably leads to cash flow issues that can kind of translate all the way up into even an ancillary provider like yourself. I'm
Yes.
not sure if you've ever worked in the plant touching side, but from all the brands that you work with and all the experience you've had over the years doing this, what would you advise a plant touching business that's selling to a dispensary? They're in the same position that you're in. The dispensary saying, "Hey, give me 30 days, but I'm not paying any deposit." How do you maneuver those conversations if you feel like that dispensary might just go to the next brand down the street and ask for terms as well? Is there anything that you could provide your own clients with advice if you were having that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I always advise to the client to have really special products. One, because that helps differentiate yourself from other people, where then that dispensary is not going to just go to the next person and then not pay you. If you have special products, they tend to want to come back to you because you're the only one providing that product. And a lot of those products are the faster mover ones. So then it tends to be that the dispensary is going to want to pay you on time because they want those products back. And I do also advise that these brands, they really have to be firm on, if the dispensary is not paying on time, to move on. I've seen a lot of cases where the brands, they continue to give them product, and they're saying, okay, we're going to get paid eventually. Eventually, we're going to get paid, and then it doesn't happen. So it's kind of like the same thing with us, right? If this is a pattern, to avoid it, I would also do their due diligence in that. Like, I would try to figure out and kind of use similar platforms to you, or your platform, where you can really see if the dispensary is paying on time, right? Are they actually doing that, or are they just saying that? other brands might have similar experiences where they can then kind of really vouch for these people and say, hey, they are paying on time and they are good partners. But if you're hearing a predominant, bad flag on these or bad reputation on these dispensaries, I would definitely just avoid it. I know it hurts in terms of not getting the sale, but it's just better not to get the sale than to put yourself in that risk, especially if you're starting a company where that could essentially make or break the business.
Yeah, I think you nailed it in the sense of having really strong competitive products mixed with being able to move on and choose your customer. Because if you don't have those things, you're going to be backed in a corner and you're going to be forced to make decisions that are going to inevitably really hurt you long term. And it's sad because we're seeing it over and over and over again. However, when we talk about these things, especially coming from both of us now are in ancillary positions. I used to run a cannabis company myself. It's been a long time. Then I was in packaging. Now I'm here doing credit collections. Seems like you've been really focusing your time here in the packaging space. So let's say the majority of our members and clients here are operators. They might look at us now and say, it's way easier said than done. What do you mean, have a unique product? What do you mean what does that mean? And I think it's actually a really interesting question for you because you kind of are in the business and packaging world of trying to help clients make a special product and try to identify how to promote a unique identifier on brands and on their packaging. What is your answer to that if you're talking to, let's say, a vertically integrated company? They might sell flower, pre-rolls, whatever they do. What does it mean to have a special enough product that will allow you to get paid on time, number one, but really be able to stand out and dominate and hold the power as you're making sales out there?
Yeah, so I would say that the data is the key here because look at like data like on like Headset, or I even talk to a lot of these dispensaries. And one thing that I see is like there kind of is like a pattern where California is the most mature market and it tends to be that they are the ones that are kind of the most innovative. But that pattern usually follows and goes to the different states. So for instance, like in California, one of the biggest things that has boomed in the past 1 to 2 years is infused pre-rolls. But one of the more kind of telling thing is that those infused pre-rolls are booming because people are using glass tips, ceramic tips, wood tips, not necessarily just like a regular paper cone, which is basically 90% of the whole market, just a regular paper cone. And if you look at the sales data, you can actually see that these SKUs are actually now becoming the top selling SKUs. So you can then start to see that that's happening. That happened already in California in the past 1 to 2 years. But then if you look further in the data and if you're in a state that's not too mature, you can actually look inside these softwares and then see what's coming up. And we were just out in Michigan. In Michigan, now the glass tip and ceramic tip is actually becoming a top 10 SKU for a lot of these companies. And we're seeing that the trend is going up in terms of purchases being done on these products. So I would definitely recommend utilizing, software like Headset where you can really get this data and like get it live, not have to wait so that it's like a year report where it's coming out. Another thing too, which, I would definitely recommend a lot of our clients and anybody that's looking at the podcast is that we have like a white paper for all this, like everything that's going on in the pre-roll market, which kind of, we lean on seeing a lot of the different trends that are going to happen. And we give this white paper for free. So I would recommend that clients kind of look at that because you need to get educated in knowing what are the trends and then getting in front of it, especially if you're in a state that's not too mature, because that is really where you're going to get ahead of the competition. And that's where, you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel by coming up with something crazy, but you're kind of utilizing that data to then show that there is viability in this product. And then that these dispensaries that haven't received it yet, once they do see that and they start seeing people return on these items, they're going to kind of want to come back to you for more items. And then you can then start to upsell them on other items that you might be pushing as well.
I love this because it seems like so often now we're like, we're kind of forced to overcomplicate business, right? Because we're sitting here saying there is a collection epidemic. We know cannabis has gotten hit. There's so many factors of why the industry is having tough times. And we don't need to go into all those, but it's more like, okay, what do we need to do, right? What's the number one or two things on the list to help our business thrive and succeed? And we can go into really dialing in credit processes, credit policies, checking credit, which absolutely needs to be done. If you're going to extend credit, you need to be doing some sort of credit check before you just give somebody a free loan. I think we can all agree there. But when you just mentioned, okay, let's look at data, know our market, and be able to build and sell a product that's very competitive, that we know is going to stand out against the rest, there's nothing more powerful that you can do to dictate your own future than absolutely know that you've got something that somebody else really wants, and it's not just a commodity that they can go to the next person. That's very difficult to do, right? Because you're really going to have your management team step back and say, what are we selling and why are we getting taken advantage of? But let's say, for example, you were able to come up with a unique product with, like you said, some sort of glass tips or something that is special that people don't have regular access to. Could that be a deciding factor to be able to add that to your offering? So if a customer is not paying you, but they really want those blunts or they really want that specific pre-roll, now you've got a little bit more of a competitive edge than it's terms or nothing. I guess I'm just going to go to the next one down the street. Is that kind of what you're saying here? Is like, if you can have even one offering special, maybe that alone that you only have could give you an edge, not just credit collection, but in general to hold some sort of power against the buyer.
Yeah, for sure. Especially since if the buyer does not have this product, you have more leverage in kind of negotiating the terms, since they're gonna want the product really fast. I mean, I'm seeing that a lot of the people that buy these like special products, they tend to come back on a reorder and buy triple the amount of this product, and that usually is because the dispensary is like, yeah, it flew off the shelf. Can you get me more? And that's really where you can start to then negotiate with them further and being like, yes, can I get a deposit down? Or can we lower the net terms because these are a little bit more expensive, but I can get these to you in these dates? That's kind of where you have more leverage. And then just at the minimum, it gets you the foot in the door if you also are not been working with this dispensary. So that's kind of where I really encourage, clients to not just do the run of the mill. I know the run of the mill is important because you really want to do volume, and those probably are going to be the ones that sell the most. But these special products are what get you in there and then give you leverage so that then you can really negotiate with the buyer better.
Perfect. So we have, as you can imagine, a heavy set of members in California, Michigan, Massachusetts, Colorado, the more established states that are growing, but really Michigan, Massachusetts, Colorado, California becoming bigger and bigger and bigger every day. What are you seeing from your angle, which is a really interesting one because you're able to see a lot of these brands in different states and understanding their SKUs because you're selling with, different packaging items. What would you advise? So let's just start with California, Colorado, Michigan, and Massachusetts. In those markets, what are some products that you're seeing are really making a difference and are special in those particular markets? So anyone listening might say, I've never thought about that before.
It's actually some of our more recent products. Like we just came out with flavor bead cones. So those are the ones where there's like a terpene in the bottom of the filter clutch, and then you can squeeze it and pop it like a methanol cigarette. It's kind of coming in that like same vein. But we're seeing that and this is based off of data too, that most of the consumers that go into the shops, they're buying because of flavor. And that is mostly because of the strains, which that I highly advise everybody that's listening to really do look at the data in terms of which strains are the most best selling, because people again are looking for flavors and they attribute the strains to beef flavors. But we're just seeing that adding flavor into the pre-roll is something that a lot of people are looking for. Like these flavor beads, we got them in, we got like 100K and they basically went out of stock within like 2 weeks. And more and more people are now asking us for more flavors and are asking us to do special flavors where it's like their own terpene mix. And, it's something that's like a special flavor that they want to develop. I would definitely think that is going to continue to surge over there in developed markets like California, Massachusetts, and Oregon, Colorado, all those places, just because that is what a lot of people are going into the stores to look for. And then highly advise that people look into the ceramic tip. Ceramic tip, I would say, is the best smoking experience. I've tried all the pre-rolls. We do like R&D on all the pre-rolls that we sell, and the ceramic tip by far is the best smoking pre-roll. So if you care about smoking experience, you care about flavor, that's like the tip you really want to use. I mean, you can see in terms of also the trends, you can see some of the bigger brands like in California, Jeter's dominating with these ceramic tips, these glass tips. And that's primarily, I mean, it's obviously a good marketing piece, but it really makes the experience better. It's just once you try these products, you never want to go back to just a regular paper cone. So I definitely recommend people try that. And then also blunt wraps. A lot of people are looking for 2 gram cigar shaped blunts. They're looking for something that, kind of looks like tobacco or can smoke similar to tobacco. So highly advise that if you're not doing that type of SKU and you're just doing like a regular 1 gram pre-roll, that you look into that, because the data is also showing that a lot of buyers, especially experienced smokers, are looking for that 2 gram, whether it be that they want to smoke it themselves or they also want to bring that to like an event, like Super Bowl. I recommend people also do limited drops, like a Super Bowl pre-roll, right? So like if you know that your market is really heavy on like football, then to drop something that's only going to be available for 2 weeks, make that packaging really stand out so that it's kind of like a collectible. And that's how you get really dedicated fans to then follow you and then start to look at all the drops you're going to have like on your social media.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I used to sell premium packaging every day, and then the market started turning, and I decided to focus more on collections. It's a really fascinating conversation for me personally, because these things really do go hand in hand. And it's not something that we think about enough, where it's like, if you do have limited drops or you do have a special product, then the chances of you selling that product, even on terms and getting paid, is going to be higher than if you only had, a very similar product that's already out on the market. And these ideas that you're throwing out there are unique, they're different. But the problem that I saw out there was a lot of brands weren't able to or willing to invest in more of a premium option to stand out, because they either had cash flow issues, or they had tight budgets, or they just didn't believe that, by having a nicer case is going to help sell a pre-roll pack versus, selling them in doob tubes. What can you preach to say that this really has shown to help sales for some of your clients, and to back up that it is important to invest in your business, to invest in your brand, to invest in your packaging, not only to make sales and grow and survive, but also you have a higher chance of getting paid, it sounds like, too, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the testament is that we have always focused on small business. When we started, we had people that were literally just farmers, and then they were thinking of doing pre-rolls. And we have grown a lot of these companies as or like a partnership, where we have gone from people that buy 5,000 pre-rolls to now above 250,000. And that really was with us partnering up on these special products. I know they're higher price point, but that's really where you would want to come to us too, because we're a one-stop shop. So if you're buying all these things together, then we can give you a better price on on the items as well. Not just the pre-rolls, it would be like the packaging as well. We can bundle things together. But that's where, as I kind of mentioned previously, there's never really been a time where a client has been buying these special products and that they haven't then doubled or tripled their reorder. Like I said, we've seen people go from these small companies to now they're even thinking about becoming MSOs, which is crazy to even think about. And also another thing too is that these MSOs are reaching out to us to jump on calls so that they can figure out what is the new product they should do, because the MSOs are realizing, yeah, they have a full hold on the state, but there's a lot of competition that's coming in, and they're looking for more guidance on that. So that's kind of where, I really would recommend that somebody like reach out to us, and then we do a call and we work together on the idea. I know that like a lot of like the pricing and all that can be like a barrier, but that's something like a conversation that you can have with us, and then we can help out as much as possible. Like, we know brand matters. So if your brand is strong and if you show that to us, then we're more than willing to like help you guys out with.
Yeah, I think that's is key, is just investing in the brand is scary, investing in packaging is scary, investing in kind of like the future right now is scary, because a lot of people just don't have a lot of money. So it's easy to throw these things out there, but I really firmly believe that what you're saying is totally accurate, where if you're going to be competitive, you have to make those investments. And you also mentioned a lot around data. Like, how often is your company yourself utilizing, you mentioned headset, during this, like, how often are you guys actually looking at data to make decisions for sales and, just business decisions in general?
For me, every day, I'm pretty shocked, at least in the past year, how the whole industry has been moving. Like, we're seeing like companies like, let's say in Washington, one that, I would love to like mention, like UI, they went up like 80 rankings in 1 year. Within this 1 year, they went up from 80 rankings and are now in the top 5 in Washington for pre-rolls. So we're just seeing like crazy movement. Like in Michigan, we're seeing people move 50 rankings, 60 rankings. Like in California, which top 10 barely has moved, we've seen new players come in. We've seen people like Time Machine, Evidence. They're now like in the top 20, top 15, and which is a super, super hard thing to do, especially in the developed California market. So I would say often, just because recently it's just been crazy in terms of the movement. And then as a company, we really rely on the data for our educational pieces. We do blogs every week. We just came out with one in terms of like the state of New York, just kind of like what are the trends we're seeing there. We come out with a blog at least for state by state, at least like twice per month. And then we also come out with a lot of videos kind of showing like what is the trends that are happening in the market. So I would say often, and I honestly think that that's actually been the leading thing that's helped us in the past like 2 years, because it's been vital to know where pre-rolls are going. Like once you let somebody know that's also like on the fence of whether they should do pre-rolls or not, but then you let them know the data that basically pre-rolls is about to overtake flower as like the number one category for cannabis, you start to at least, look into it further, because you're kind of like, whoa. And then when you also start to realize, just also based on the data, that technically pre-rolls has the best profit margin out of all of the categories, you also start to think, yeah, it's making more sense to then start to do pre-rolls.
Yeah, it's fascinating, especially around like just being in your lane, knowing your business, and really dialing in on that. And you guys at Custom Cone seem to be hyper focused, obviously, on pre rolls and knowing your audience, knowing your business, knowing your market, and that same idea should translate to everyone that's operating. Obviously, not just in cannabis, but in general. To really know your business, and to know your business, that you need to know the market conditions and the data around your business. It's unfortunate still, because I still think that the industry is developing. It's a little bit less sophisticated than I think we all hope it will get, in a sense of we should all be acting in that manner. I mean, I speak to prospects and leads every day that are extending credit, that are getting burned, are sending accounts to collections, but they don't want to spend $100 to $200 a month on data to make better decisions when they extend credit. And it's kind of like, well, if you're going to do something, if you're going to make an action, you have to utilize data to back up that action, period. If you don't have information in anything, when you're playing sports, if you're out there playing a game and you don't have the information or the know-how to play, you're going to get beat, right? So it's really, really interesting how you guys are leveraging the information that you guys have available, including CCA, including Headset, including even developing your own blogs and education, which through that process, you're learning, right? Through building and making blogs and teaching, you're learning. So I think that's awesome. I respect that a lot. Before we run out of time, John, I want to hear from you, like most wild, kind of interesting or a unique story you've had when it's come to chasing somebody for collections.
I would say probably the most, I wouldn't say it's outlandish, but it's pretty weird. Basically, we have like a client that we extended terms really early on. They ended up not paying for it, but then a year to 2 years later, they come back with a new rep wanting to put a big order and then wanting to put it back on net terms. And then we're like, hey, I have this open invoice from 2 years ago. Nobody responded to us. And then they were like, oh, we completely forgot about that, but can we just void that and then put this new order on net terms still? And we're kind of like, wait, what? Like, what is that? How does that make sense? And then we like spoke with the CEO, and he like reiterated that it was just a weird thing, and we had to deny the order. And the craziest thing about that was that then a year later came out an article that it was like a bust, where they were basically like an illegal provider of all this material, and they had all their items seized. So we ended up probably like, avoiding a bullet there, where this person was probably not going to pay us, was just trying to sweep it under the rug, previous invoice. And we had the systems to then see the invoice was still open. Accounting team did a really good job of flagging the account, so that if anytime they ever came back, we knew that and we're kind of ahead of it before even going through the motions of making a new invoice. So I would also just, really encourage people to have good systems. Like we use like invoice.com, which is really good in terms of having, notes in the files, and then kind of let you know if there's anything that you need to know about immediately. And I can't stress enough too, like your platform, we've caught so many people that have been flagged. where we would have probably extended 3 years ago, we probably would extend the terms. And thankfully, our accounting team was like, no, this one is too iffy, or this one actually has gotten so many different flags. And recently, they probably were good before, but recently they've gotten so many flags that it's best to avoid it. So yeah, I can't trust enough that like the systems, you really need to have good note taking. You need to be all on the same page to avoid these type of things to happen.
Said it really well, John. I can't say it any better. So, how many of these customers that go late on you, or like this example that you mentioning, it seems like they were obviously probably trying to take advantage of you guys. If you had to guess, like out of all the customers that go late on terms and either don't cooperate or stop answering your calls or your accounting team's calls, what percentage of those customers do you think, and it's kind of a very subjective question, are calling ill-willed, negative-willed, actors, bad actors that are trying to take advantage versus might be good people, might be good, at heart, and they just really don't have the means to pay? What percentage of those do you think are actually just bad actors?
Actually, I would say surprisingly, probably like a small amount. Like if I had to estimate, it would probably be like 5 to 10%. Because a lot of the times I've seen that these strategies that these bad actors use, it kind of is like a pattern. It's like a script. So we kind of like, kind of educate our sales reps to know this. Like if people don't want to jump on phone calls, if they don't want to do a Zoom call and show their face, you start to get in like, kind of like an iffy territory where why are they doing that? And then you kind of want to push them on that. But I would say a lot of the people, unfortunately, are just people that got into the industry and thought that it was going to be really lucrative and then didn't realize that it's just super competitive. And it's also that you really need to execute beyond just making the flower and doing all that. You need to execute on the brand. You need to execute on the relationships. You need to execute on getting all your stuff at the right time. So I would say it's not a large percentage of what most people think. Like even our website where people do chargebacks and can, are like scammers, we realize that it's not even that much. It's like right now we probably have like chargebacks of like 2% of people that do that over the year, which is pretty low. It's like not even worth getting insurance on. So I like to be positive and think that most people are just, obviously just they're not planning well. And it's kind of surprising in that because you would think there will be more scammers, but I think we do good things to kind of weed them out. And I think they're getting less wanting to even try to do it just because they kind of know the patterns that we know that they're doing to try to scam us.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, looking forward, John, looking 2 or 3 years in the future, where do you see this industry going? You guys obviously use data. You guys are obviously selling across the country. Where do you see this industry going high level? Maybe you want to touch on what your thoughts on are on legalization or just what's generally happening in this industry. And then what things should the market look forward to specifically around what Custom Cones is doing? If there's anything that, is exciting coming up in the next year, 2 years that you want to drop in here, it'd be great to hear.
Yeah. I mean, the debate that we always have internally is like, is the is the cannabis industry going to be like the wine market where it's just going to be, a craft market where, yes, there might be some top players that have the best wine, but then there's still a lot of different vineyards that are making these special wines, which I feel that that's going to happen with the market, even if it gets federally legalized. I personally think it's best to do it state by state. I've seen that it's great that some states have like really made great systems. And I would hate for the federal legalization to kind of revert all that back. Obviously to on the vice versa, there are some states that kind of do need this help where they probably should revert a lot of the things they've done because it has not been some things that have been good for the state. But I do think that it's hopefully going to still be a state-by-state thing. I do think the craft market is going to exist. I know that obviously the bigger players are going to have like automations that are going to drive the cost down. But at the end of the day, people really are proud of their weed and the consumers are wanting to get the best weed. They want something that's like premium that I don't think the bigger players are going to necessarily be able to execute on. I still think it's those farmers that, know the ins and outs, have the tribal knowledge that are going to produce some of the best quality weed. And that's why I think that that's going to continue to be a craft market. And I think some of the new states that are going to come in are probably going to be some of the bigger players, right? Eventually, Florida and Texas are going to then become recreational. Those are probably going to be some of the bigger markets. New York is just, it's only in its infancy over there, right? I think it's going to continue to develop and it's going to then follow a lot of the trends. I hope it follows some trends that are positive, especially like a state in Washington, which I consider was Washington to be the best market. Might not necessarily be the best market for the farmers, but is the best market for the consumers, which I hope in general the market always puts the consumer first, and that, you know, we are strict on not allowing heavy metals and pesticides, but we're also, you know, wanting to get the price down to be competitive for the consumer so they can actually purchase this stuff and not have to break the bank to even get to the plant. And that's what I really hope happens in the industry and continues to happen in all the different states. And then long term for us, our plan is to make different warehouses in different locations. You know, ideally have one in the East Coast, have one in the South. Once those you know, areas develop more, so that we can ship to you guys faster. You guys can visit us more often. You know, you don't have to travel all the way to Washington if you really want to see us here in the warehouse. I would say long term, we would definitely want to do that, whether it be in a 3PL capacity or to actually have like a warehouse and a whole team there. That would be like a long term plan. I think something that we can try to execute within the next 3 years.
Amazing, John. Well, I look forward to seeing what you guys do over there. This was awesome. I had a good time, a lot of good information, and thanks for being on this with me. Much appreciated.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Brad. I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, always reach out to us. We're customconesusa.com. Definitely reach out to us on the website or give us a call.
Hasta luego, amigo.
All right.
Gracias.
Igual.